Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Christine Tolleson, the Director of Integration at Steel, and as I think has been mentioned here once or twice today, I'll be celebrating 17 years with the company in August. I know I'm dating myself a little bit. I've seen a lot happen in the industry during that time, but prior to coming to Steel, I had a short stint as a stay-at-home mom, but I spent 14 years in the benefits industry out in California. 10 years as working with a broker's office, and then 4 years as a carrier rep. And talk about a lot of changes since then. You know, something that isn't as relevant in the benefits world, but let's talk about the dress code for a minute. Back in those days, you had to wear pantyhose, and you know, if I was up here without that and a slip and all these things, I remember, I don't know about you, but sometimes public speaking, you can get a little stressed and you know, you're worried about the worst things that could happen. And I had a manager that was giving a presentation back during that time, and she was kind of pacing back and forth, and little by little, her slip just kept slipping and slipping and slipping, to the point that she just kind of kicked it off to the side and kept on talking. And so I'm really glad that with those changes today, I don't have to worry that my slip's gonna fall off while I'm talking to you. So I am really happy about the changes in what we get to wear when we are working now as well. But what I want to talk to you about during this session is what we can do with data feeds and integration that will help put more time back on your plate so that you can do more things, whether that be other services within your company or just allow you not to have to work so much so that you can spend more time with your families. And how we're going to accomplish that with file feeds and data integration. With carrier file feeds, most of you that have been on our system for some time are familiar with a carrier file feed, but I do want to talk just briefly about what they are. It is a generally formatted report that gets sent to your carriers that we have to decipher what type of information it is that they need, and that it goes over to the carrier in the language that they're wanting. And so what that does for you is, rather than you having to key into multiple systems, we're able to have you enter the information into our system, the employee enrolls, and then all of that data is going to get deciphered and sent directly to the carriers so that you're not having to log into the portals. Typically what happens is those files go over on a weekly basis and they're processed once a week. In most cases, they can be processed immediately. Sometimes the carriers are pulling them off on their end and then processing them. So you may not see things happening at the exact time that you're expecting, but it's important for you to know when those files go over so that if you have situations where you've got new employees that you're entering into your system or someone that needs to be entered in relatively quickly, you understand what that timing looks like and when the expectation is that they're going to be entered into the system. Once those files are processed, you are typically getting a discrepancy report from the carrier, whether that be from Anthem, Guardian, MetLife, whoever. When you see those come through to your email, we want you to be sure that you're reading through that information and answering any questions that the carrier has in regards to something that maybe didn't look right. We get those as well. You might see my name CC'd on them, or we're trying to set up everything going to just a general EDI mailbox, but we literally get hundreds of those every week, so it's impossible for us to be looking at all of those. So we're looking to you as our partner with that if you see something that you don't understand or that you're wanting us to take a closer look at, that you reach out to us about it. But we really do want that responsibility to lie within your department as reviewing those on a regular basis. There's the carrier files, but then there are also some other files that can help you that you might be doing manually right now that you're not really aware of that we can set up for you. And I wanted to talk about some of those. Most of you in the room have a COBRA administrator. If you don't, I highly recommend it, but I know that there's some of you that are managing COBRA on your own. And if you are, we want to be able to help you out with that. For your COBRA administrators, we're typically sending 2 files to them right now. And one is your initial notice letters, who needs to receive those, and then when you're keying in a qualifying event, who needs to get a qualifying event letter. But if you are manually handling that process of sending those letters, we can still go ahead and set up that same type of reporting to be sent to you so that you don't have to keep track of who has gone into the system and enrolled in new benefits that needs that initial notice letter, who is entering in a life event for an overage dependent and they need to get that COBRA letter. You can allow us to send you that report that will tell you that versus you having to manually track that information. Same thing with your flexible spending account providers. We can set up file feeds to those providers that will send over data information to them as to who those accounts should be set up with. And anytime you're looking at changing providers, be sure to reach out to us and ask us, here's some of the candidates that we're looking at. We consider ourselves to be carrier agnostic in terms of you can pick whatever provider you want, but we're more than willing to give you feedback on the ones that we feel work well with the reporting or that we've had experience with. We recently had a client, for a COBRA administrator, they changed administrators because they didn't feel like the reporting was what it needed to be, but there was no input, and they changed to someone that we've never used before. So if you kind of just include us in that conversation, we can just help provide you with some feedback of who we've had some really good experiences with. If you have an on-site clinic and you need a membership report, I know some of you have those coming out of our system while others are manually providing that. We're more than willing to set that reporting up for you if it's something that needs to mirror your medical insurance coverage or whatever you need to do. And we can also set up users in your system that are report recipients only. So if you don't want to have that report sent to you and then you in turn send it to your clinic provider, you can give us their information and we can set it up to where they have a login and password into the system, but the only purpose for it and the only thing that they would have access to is reports that are actually sent to them. Same thing with wellness programs. We've had a lot of requests for those lately, and I feel like in some cases it's because the medical insurance carriers are maybe not willing or taking longer to set up those files. But if you have a wellness provider that you need us to send information on who's eligible for any type of a wellness program, we can set those files up for you as well. We just need to know what the parameters are, what the information is that's needed, and who is it that needs to be sent over on the files, and we can get those set up. And then this is one that isn't as widely used, but I'm sure most of you would prefer to use this versus having to manually track this information. When you have someone who separates from service and you have life insurance benefits that they are eligible to convert, there are some carriers that will send those conversion letters for you, and they just need to know who it is that they need to send the information to. So you can, I haven't mentioned this as much today in my sessions, but you can talk to your CSM about that, and we can look at getting that set up. We were laughing when we were going through our slides. I think I said it about 6 or 7 times, and they told me they were going to get me a shirt made that said, "Ask your CSM," and they were all going to have shirts made that said, "Ask Christine," because they thought that would be funny. But they can definitely help you out with that and work with our technology department on getting those files set up. And I know that the groups that we do have those running really appreciate the idea that they don't have to worry about getting that conversion paperwork sent any longer, that the carrier is going to take care of that for them. Also wanted to talk a minute about the deliverables on your home screen. Some of you may have seen this section before and really wondered, what is that? What is it used for? And why is it on here? But we have set up mostly for communication purposes between our technology team and your customer success team. We'll set up these deliverables to show here's all the files that we have running, and it gives us an idea of when was the last time that it ran, when is it going to run again, and is there an issue? There are some security features with the delivery system that we use that's called a fingerprint. And last week, we had every file that we sent on a particular day to Anthem failed because the fingerprint expired. And luckily we caught it before our busiest day of Anthem files, because we would have had even more that would have been failing the next day. So we were able to go in and update those, but how we were notified was by seeing a bunch of red deliverables on people's home screens that those were failing. And unfortunately, the VSP fingerprint failed the very next day, that those all expired. And typically, sometimes they expire annually and sometimes they don't. But if you are ever on your home screen and you see your deliverables, there's something that's red there, that's kind of an indication that there's a problem. And we may not always be on that screen. We'll get notifications, but if we haven't had a chance to look at it yet, feel free to reach out to your CSM and just notify them, hey, I'm seeing this red, is there a problem? Ben's keeping count of how many times I'm referring back to them. But what we're also going to be doing on this is something kind of new that we've started, and we did this based on a recommendation from a recent trip that I took with our team to Solarix in Texas, is for those of you that are new, or if you are adding carriers and we're in the process of setting up your feed, we're going to go ahead and put them on the deliverable screen right from the very beginning before we even start testing. And that way, that will kind of help give you an indication of whether or not that file is running or if it's still in testing. And that will just be another easy communication in terms of being able to see that right on the home screen. If it's red, then you know we still don't have that file up and running. Something to keep in mind with that as we're getting into open enrollment, if you are looking at changing carriers, there's times that we can get files up fairly quickly in some cases, but there's some carriers that go into a blackout period beginning in like October where they will not accept any new file feeds for new clients. So if you're looking at making a change to your medical, it may be past a deadline before that change is solidified. And the only thing that we can really do is go ahead and send them a spreadsheet of your enrollment and then start the file feed process maybe in January. So just understand how that process works, I guess. I want to talk to you a little bit about integration. Your cases, I refer a lot when I'm training people that I look at your case as a giant puzzle with a lot of moving pieces regarding your eligibility and our file feeds and everything. And integration is kind of the final pieces of putting everything together so that all the information that is come into the system is now going to go out and get to where it needs to be. One that we're really working on right now that will be new for most of you as we begin this process is evidence of insurability. We're super excited to see that there are several connections available through Solarix for evidence of insurability for either late applicants or for someone who's applying for benefits over and above GI. How many people hate the pending queue after you get done with an enrollment and there's just tons and tons of policies that are pending? So that's what we're hoping to be able to set these bridges up and get set up for you for this enrollment season and beyond. Payroll integration, Wes had mentioned, that's a top priority of ours, and that's really, I've taken on kind of a more defined role within the company in that I am mainly specializing in the reporting and integration side of things now, so that we can really focus on bringing better payroll reporting to you, and that I would have more time available to do that. And then there's also some single sign-on opportunities as well. So with evidence of insurability, and what I've done here, just kind of in the spirit of what would I do if I had more time, this is me and my grandson. And so he's number one, that's the first thing I do when I have more time is spend more time with him. But in terms of evidence of insurability, these are some of the carriers that we're working with on those connections. MetLife is a big one that we're working on right now with some of the groups that have voluntary term life, and we want to be able to have the employees answer questions right when they're on those enrollment screens and be able to get that information into the hands of the carrier so that they can make that information, make those determinations and not have you chasing people down to get evidence of insurability filled out. So If you see a carrier on here that is someone that's yours and the pending queue is an issue for you, let your CSM know. With the API integration with payroll, that's fairly new. And just to give you an idea about this picture, spending more time, I like to travel. I do have a trip planned next month to go up to northern Michigan to kayak the Pictured Rocks area. So I'm pretty excited about that. And with API integration, we've got a couple companies that we're working with right now. For those of you that are in the education realm, it's not as relevant to you because you're mostly using local providers, but Wes did mention like the CompuTrolls and things like that. We're still talking to them about being able to add API integration, which is basically the exchange of information in a live environment with the integrations that we have set up right now through Paylocity and also through Paycor. You can enter information into payroll, and within 2 minutes, that information is either sitting on a dashboard or it's coming straight through, just depending on how you want it set up, where it will come into our system, and that employee is then can sign in and enroll in their benefits. And once they've enrolled in their benefits, then once that's been finalized, within 2 minutes, it's going back over to the payroll vendor to set up their payroll deductions. So again, for those of you who may possibly be looking at changing payroll vendors in the future, things like that, be sure to have a conversation with us about that. I know that Slarix is adding other API connectivity on an ongoing basis and looking at other vendors to bring in. So any input that we can give you to help with that choice of who you might be changing to, just let us know. But I know we do have several active connections with these two vendors right now. In terms of single sign-on, I'll explain this picture as well. The next thing is I love to go to live music events, and this picture is very new. It was last week. Me and my coworker and friend Courtney were at a concert together seeing Stevie Nicks. So she didn't find out about this picture until earlier this morning when I was paging through my slides, and she was sitting there, and I was like, oh shoot, I didn't say anything. And I was like, hey, Courtney. And she turns around and looks, she was like, oh no, what are you doing? But we had a great time up at Ruoff. So that is just another one of those, when I have more time, those are some of the things I like to do. But in terms of single sign-on, there's a couple different principles with the single sign-on ability. And ProLiant is one of the companies that we currently have active single sign-on. With that one, there's actually an exchange of data where employee demographic information is coming over from ProLiant and loading into Slarix, and then once employees are enrolling, deduction information is going back. But we also have in testing right now a single sign-on with Paylocity and also with Paycor that would give you the ability, when employees log into their payroll account through those vendors, that they can just make a selection there and go right into their employee benefits account on our system versus having to actually use the still URL or whatever URL it is that you're using for your benefit plan. Depending upon your payroll provider, I had a conversation with Ruthie about this last week. If they have the technology and the programmers on their side that can set up these connections, we can talk to them about being able to offer single sign-on from their payroll sites. But I don't know. It's one of those situations. Talk to your CSM, and then they will talk to me, and then we will have conversations with the LAUs and the CompuTrolls and things like that. I just don't know how many of your employees are logging into those systems to view payroll data, if it makes sense or not. But if they are, it's something that we can definitely talk about. And so really, just in terms of the reporting and the integration, what we're trying to do is just to make sure that everything that we're doing from that end is relieving you from something that you're having to do in a manual environment or in a multi-system environment. So if you have suggestions, if there's pain points, if you're finding that data is not working correctly or things like that, be sure to let us know. We just had a situation come up with one of our clients where terminations were just falling off of the file feed instead of actually sending the termination date. And so what was happening there is on their discrepancy file, every time someone terminated, they were being asked, what's the termination date? Why, when did this terminate? And what was the reason? Well, we were able to get that issue resolved by getting in contact with Celeric's support and saying, this really is a pain point, and that now there's not going to be that issue going forward. Those cancellation dates are going to go over. But sometimes if someone doesn't tell us about it, we don't know that problem exists. So be sure to communicate with us. I'm a little harder to get a hold of, so CSM, then they'll track me down, and we can work together on getting those issues resolved.